Let me introduce myself. I am Master William Shakespeare.
Okay, so you'll help me, yes? Okay, brilliant! Yes, by Joe's pancreas, that is fantastic! For the first time in months, I am officially in the flower! Yeah!
Shakespeare Goes Viral is a podcast inspired by Will & Co.'s project Bard in the Yard. Learn more about Shakespeare's life, writings, and key themes that inspired him. Listen to writer and director Victoria Gartner tell you a story like no other.
Hello, my name's Alix. I have been acting professionally since 2004 when I graduated from drama school, mainly working in theatre, quite a few commercials and the odd bit of telly. I've done lots of Shakespeare, but very rarely for any money, mostly voluntary. I've worked with a company called the Factory Theatre Company quite a lot, which is where sort of you'll learn a part in a Shakespeare play, and then whoever is free will turn up and you'll just do the show with whatever props come to hand in whatever space you can find. And I worked in the lockdowns, I worked with a company called The Show Must Go Online, who put on the entire works of Shakespeare on Zoom. And I played Coriolanus, which no one else was going to let me do, so that was nice. So I think the anecdote that I'm going to choose about doing Bard in the Yard was... so I am an accent coach when I'm not doing acting, and so I'm pretty good at accents and switching between them. And so I decided that I was going to do one of the speeches in my Bard in the Yard performance. It was going to be accent karaoke, so the audience could choose any accent they liked for it to be in. And, you know, it basically my thinking is, if you do the first sentence and it's more or less convincing, they'll buy it for the whole rest of the speech, even if you go seriously off track, because they'll be so impressed that you went for it, you said you were going to do it, and you went for it, and it more or less works, that they'll forgive you for the rest of it. So, you know, I've done Geordie, and that was all right, and Northern Irish, and that was all right, and German, and that was, the accent was good, but I forgot the lines, and etc., etc. And then the only time my mum saw it, and she knew this was a thing, she knew that I was doing this, and she's sitting there watching it, absolutely living it in her face, like going through the highs and lows very, very facially, as she does when I can see her in the audience. And we get to that bit and I go, so I think he should have a different accent in this speech. Now, what accent should I do? And she immediately goes, Mexican. And I'm like, Mexican. And I can't go, Mum, because she's not my mum. I'm Shakespeare. She's Alix Dunmore's mum, not Shakespeare's mum. So I'm like, Mexican. And she puts her hands over her face like the word Mexican has escaped the prison of her mind without her realising it. And so I do it, and it's okay, and that's fine, and it kind of ruins my joke later on about pretending to be Inigo Montoya from The Princess Bride, but whatever. And later I'm like, why did you do that? She's like, I didn't think you were actually going to do it. So don't let your mum join in with the audience participation, is my advice.
Oh, are we ready? Oh, right. Knock, knock! Who's there? Oh, you get it, it's great. Okay, let's try that one again, but like that, okay? Knock, knock! Who's there? William Shakespeare! William Shakespeare who? What do you mean, William Shakespeare who? There's only one of me.
Episode 3, Shakespeare and Comedy. When I think about Shakespeare, I think about drama, murder, betrayal, love, potentially, but I do not think about laughter, wit, sense of humor. It's really not the first thing that comes to my mind, but apparently, maybe it should.
Two things about that. Number one, I mean, it's hilarious, but it is 400-year-old jokes, right? I don't know if you've tried like watching a comedy show from 10 years ago, you're kind of like, what's going on? Why did I used to find this funny? Humor is a very delicate thing. I think the only thing that has stood the test of time for me from my childhood is like Flight of the Conchords. I still find them absolutely hilarious. There's that one show that's on YouTube that everyone has seen, still funny. Now, everything else doesn't age very well. So Shakespeare's jokes are 400-year-old jokes that, in terms of wit, all of the witty word plays that sometimes go on and on and on for an entire scene, and where to Elizabethan this would have been hilarious stuff, we need 3 pages of footnotes to get what on earth is going on right. And that's not really funny. Nobody wants to read 3 pages of footnotes to get a joke. It comes with a bit of work. The deal in theatre, the deal in modern theatre, is that we as practitioners, we as directors, creatives, actors, we are going to do the homework of finding out what it means and then try to convey it in the clearest way possible, and then add a bit of movement, situation, something to it that will make you laugh. That's one type of humour that unfortunately got a bit lost. Now, also, equally, in Shakespeare, only with words, he also still manages to make us laugh. That's something I discovered by mistake. I didn't believe in it. I really did think that in terms of wit, the best we could do was just sit through it and hope for the best. I discovered it working on the Comedy of Errors in Switzerland with a wonderful director called Matthias Urban. And for the first time, I realised how funny the Dromio speech in the Comedy of Errors is. And I realised how funny it was because every night, as I sat in that theatre, everyone was laughing their heads off at a 400-year-old joke about an oversized kitchen wench who pursues Dromio. That was the first time I realised that Shakespeare is still funny, even 400 years later. Like, how incredible is that?
Do you know me? Am I Dromio? Am I your man? Am I myself? I am an ass. Oh. And marry, sir, I am a woman's man. And besides myself, marry, sir, besides myself, I am due to a woman. One that claims me, one that haunts me, one that will have me. She's the kitchen wench, and all grease. And I know not you're used to put her to, but to make a lamp from her and run from her by her own light. Her rags and tallow in them, I swear, would burn a Poland winter. If she lived till doomsday, she would burn a week longer than the whole world. Her complexion is swart, like my shoe, but her face is nothing like so clean kept. Oh, her name is Nell, sir, and her name and 3/4, now that's an L and 3/4, would not measure her from hip to hip. She is spherical, like a globe. I could make out countries in her.
For me, as Shakespeare's strength in terms of comedy is situational comedy. Shakespeare invented situational comedy. The way it works is the characters don't know something that the audience does. We as the audience are privy to what the real situation is. For instance, in the case of Twelfth Night, we know that Viola is dressed as a man. So all her scenes with the Duke Orsino, who talks about, oh, it looks like you've been in love, boy. Let me find the line. That's not the one. All right, this is the one. So Orsino is questioning Viola, who's dressed as a boy called Cesario. So she found herself a new name. And Viola is desperately in love. Orsino, the Duke, is chilling out in his palace, questioning his new servant Cesario, who's actually Viola, dressed as a man. She can't tell him she's in love with him because for now she's basically an orphan in the world and has no protection, no family, no connections, no nothing because she believes her brother's drowned. But she's really, 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 really in love with him. And Orsino goes, my life upon it. Young though thou art, thy nine has stayed upon some favour that it loves, has it not, boy? Viola goes, a little, by your favour. Orsino, what kind of woman is it? Viola, of your complexion, right? Orsino, she's not worth thee then. What years, in faith? How old is she? He's asking. About your years, my lord. Orsino goes, too old, by heaven. And then he says something quite misogynistic, blah, blah, blah. And then goes, let thy love be younger than thyself, for women are as roses, whose fair flower, being once displayed, doth fall that very hour. And Viola obviously defends her sex, and so they are. Alas that they are so, to die even when they to perfection grow. We're there, and this is quite bittersweet, right? This is not haha. We know what situations the characters are in and why it's funny. And we feel for them, we feel with them while they struggle to make sense of the world as it is. It's something that now is used everywhere, but that Shakespeare really masters beautifully because it is about telling a story. All his plays are about telling a beautiful story and about the characters' emotional states. But it's also about gaining the audience's trust and respect. The relationship with the audience, which is paramount in comedy. In order to make people laugh, you have to give them something, right? You have to respect their intelligence and you have to want to give them something. You have to have them on your side, right? Nobody's going to laugh at your jokes if they're not on your side. And it becomes hilarious for us, In A Midsummer Night's Dream, same thing. I've seen that over and over again when the lovers, so the two couples, fall in love with each other in countless triangles that become this kind of like weird pyramid scheme thing. It's Lysander and Hermia, they're in love with each other. Demetrius is also in love with Hermia, and Helena is in love with Demetrius. Now, they all go into the forest because Lysander and Hermia are trying to go get married. Helena tells Demetrius, he follows Hermia, she follows him. She is super in love with him. She's like, please, just use me as your spaniel. She's like, use me like a dog. I'll still love you. And Demetrius is like, just go away, please, go away. Lysander and Hermia fall asleep. Puck, the little goblin, has been tasked to put some love potion in the eyes of an Athenian youth who's mean to a girl. He sees Lysander and Hermia asleep. He thinks they're the people who needs to be solved. Puts love potion in Lysander's eyes. Lysander wakes up, sees Helena. So now he's in love with Helena. And then Demetrius also is in love with Helena at some point. So now they're both in love with Helena. Hermia gets really mad. And then there's a massive girl fight in the mud. It's great. That moment where they both fall in love with Helena and Hermia realizes it. You have that gasp in the audience. Because the audience realizes what's going on, the audience understands that there's a love potion involved, which the characters don't. And you always hear it. You hear everyone go, oh, because they know it's going to get bad. And I think it's one of Shakespeare's strengths that it's 400-year-old words and we don't get it, but we still get what it's like to have unrequited love. A lot of his comedy is based on unrequited love. That's interesting, isn't it?
And hey, nowny, 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 no. For chorus number 2, that over the green cornfields pass in the springtime, the only pretty ring time. The birds, they do sing, ring-a-ding-a-ding. I love that song, but I've always wanted to put more songs in my plays, but my best mate, Richard Burbage, he's always banning me from doing it. He says no one wants to see a play composed entirely of musical numbers, but, well, he can't dance to save his life, so I have to do what he says, though. He's the leading actor, star of the show. No one wants to see a play because it's written by William Shakespeare. That'd be ridiculous. Can you imagine?
It was very important that Bard in the Yard was somehow uplifting, right? Because times of plague, etc. It was also important for me that it was both, right? That it contained everything that is contained in Shakespeare, which is comedy, tragedy, and history. The comedy aspect hopefully shines through. There's nothing worse than writing comedy and jokes, right? Like, I'm so in awe of every writer of books, films, plays, stand-up, because writing comedy is the hardest thing. So there's a bit of everything, right? I tried to put some funny puns. Hopefully there's some jokes, haha. There's some jokes, slight smile. There's some chuckle jokes. There's some songs. I grew desperate at some point. I was like, do you know what? Let's have a funny song. Maybe that will be funny. There's some humor in the dialogues and the relationships. And it was important, right? It's laughter is the best medicine. It's also something that, as you say, people don't necessarily associate with Shakespeare. And which is very important for me in my work, which always has been important, to give people joy, to kind of, reprogram people to associate Shakespeare with joy instead of associate him with complicated, head-hurting, boring, sitting down things. And it's hard. It's not easy because it's so ingrained in us through often, unfortunately, education or the cultural weight of Shakespeare, that Shakespeare is big and long and serious and boring. And I'm trying to fight against all of these archetypes at the same time. It's hard. So it was very important that it was funny, that it was light, that it was relevant. People were really, really wanting to laugh at. There was a real sense of people wanting to laugh it out. I think the beauty of laughing together is something that's quite special. It's what really struck me when I was in that theatre night after night hearing the Dromio speech. And I actually put Dromio in the Scottish play because of that.
This drudge or diviner named me Dromio, lays claim to me, called me Dromio, swore to me that I was assured to her, told me what privy marks I have about me, such as the mole on my neck, the mark on my shoulder, and the great wart on my left arm. That I, amazed, ran from her as a witch. And I swear, if my breast had not been made of faith, and my heart of steel, she had transformed me of a curtle dog and made me turn in the wheel. As from a bear, a man would fly for life, so fly I from her that would be my wife. Goodbye.
In Shakespeare, there's quite a lot. There's quite a few, right? Clown characters who are often just called clown when you look at the script. They have names, but in the text, they're called clown. They have a hard job because they are part of this witty humour, 400-year-old witty humour, and it's very hard for them now, for contemporary actors, to get that role. There's lots of different types of clown. There's a very famous scene in The Two Gentlemen of Verona with a little dog. So it's Launce talking about his dog Crab. And we believe that there would have been a dog on stage, right? Because it's hilarious. Now, when you do the play and there's an actual dog on stage, the problem, as is a problem with every time there's a live animal or a baby on stage, is that it immediately becomes unrealistic. Hear me out. When you go watch a play, you suspend your disbelief. Somebody shows up on stage and goes, "We are in Verona, la 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 la. These are people who are doing this and that." And we go, all right, you know what? I'm going to believe you. I'm going to go for it. There's a part of our brain that loves storytelling. So a part of our very primitive brain wants to relate to storytelling because that's how we used to relay very important pieces of information back when we were freshly out of the Homo erectus stage, right? So back when we didn't have writing, we had oral history. And that was passed in the form of stories. In each story, there was a pearl of wisdom, don't eat these berries, don't hunt in that area, etc., etc. So a part of our brain is wired to believe stories as soon as they start, and we know it's the start once upon a time. So you go see a play and you're like, yay, I'm here, I'm sitting down, I'm believing that this is happening in Verona while I'm standing here. It's fine, it's all right. And then along comes a dog or a goose or, a horse if you're doing opera and have a lot of money. And the problem with that is that the animals aren't acting, they're real. Same with a baby. It's not acting, it's just being a baby. And it becomes incredibly hard to reconcile the actor to the thing right next to them that's not acting. And our brain goes, why, and it kind of doesn't compute.
The one with the dog? That? The one with the dog, Verona. Two gentlemen of Verona? No, two gentlemen of Verona. None of you know it. It's hilarious. I know people say it's boring and it's not very funny, but it's hilarious. There's a scene in it where the servant, Lawrence, is complaining about his dog Crab. Look, I need to be relatable in theatre, don't I? And what is more relatable in Britain than banging on about your dog, hasn't it? Look, let me give you an example. Xander, come with me, Xander. 2 yards from the bard, as we remember, but come on stage. Look, this will only work if I have a dog. I don't have a dog, so you can probably see where this is going. So I'm sure you've done animal studies whilst you've been training. Can you do your best dog? Such talent! Oh my God! There's a spot on the King's Players if you need it for later. So, here we go. You'll see what I mean. Look you, it goes hard. One that I brought up a puppy. One that I saved from drowning when 2 or 3 of his blind brothers and sisters went to it. I have taught him, as one should say indeed, thus I would teach a dog. Here, boy. I was sent to deliver it as a present to Mistress Sylvia from my master. And no sooner came I to the dining chamber, he steps me to her trencher and steals a capon's leg. Bah, boy. 'Tis a foul thing when a cur cannot keep himself in all companies. He is to be, as it were, a dog indeed. To be, as it were, a dog at all things.
Now, a lot of clowns in Shakespeare are also not funny. Like Jaques, and As You Like It, he's a clown. He's just a depressed clown. In King Lear, the clown, the fool, is called a fool, is incredibly wise. The fools are always very wise. The clowns are always very witty. And all of these characters are always incredibly hard to pull off. But there we go. We must find a way for them to still exist. Clowns and fools filled a place in medieval society that we don't necessarily have anymore. We have replaced them with other figures such as comedians, Now that's what we'd call them. But in each medieval court, there was an official fool, and his job was to entertain everyone and say things out loud that no one else was allowed to say. He was allowed to insult the king to his face without any repercussions because, ha ha ha, he's wearing motley, so that's fine. And it is one of those things in Shakespeare that is a bit of a challenge for us today. Often, whether they're here or not, does not make any difference to the plot. They play zero active role in the plot. They're literally just there to make funny comments on everything else that's happening. Jaques just walks around the forest being depressed and miserable, just pissing on everyone's parade. 12th night, fest day, he rocks about from one house to the next, playing songs, earning money, kind of, getting his pocket money from everyone. And that's it. That's it. You know, some of his songs allude to the fact that something's going on with Viola, but he doesn't do anything about it. It's interesting how most of these characters, you could cut them out. You could easily, you know, in the edits, cut them out of the play. But if you do, you lose something. I think we still have a lot to learn from that sense of there's something to be admired in the brazenness of having a character whose sole job it is to make fun of everything else that's going on.
Comedy. Lovely comedy. I need to break the ice with some comedy, don't I? My teenage comedies were the best, the most to the point. There's one in particular I'm sure you're all aware of. It's going down in history as one of the best. Up there with my favourites. Henry VI Part 1, Henry VI Part 2, Henry VI Part 3, absolute faves.
You talked about joy. What brings you joy when you read Shakespeare?
There's something about letting the words come through you. There's something about the energy that the words create. It's like, you know, when you're trying to start a fire with some flint. Shakespeare's words are like that. When I'm lucky enough to teach, you know, emerging artists and young actors, or, you know, older actors in a Shakespeare context, it's always about the correct position at which to hold these two pieces of flint. And then you don't have to do much. Anyone can learn how to do it because it's about getting out of the way. We, again, associate Shakespeare with something quite heavy. We get into our heads straight away. We just go, Shakespeare, oh my God, words, and our head hurts before we even start, right? When actually, the process of playing Shakespeare should be the absolute opposite. It should be getting out of the way and letting your body, your breath, your percussion system, your heartbeat, just speak the words, trippingly on the tongue, as Hamlet says. And that will generate just something magical. It's magical. This is a passage in As You Like It. Lovely. Do you know what? I'm just going to read it. I just literally... Oh, let's pick that one. Okay. So this is Jaques in As You Like It. Jaques is the very famous character who ends up saying the lovely speech about the 7 ages of man. All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts, his acts being 7 ages. So he's a very famous character. Here's another speech from Jaques, and it goes, A fool! I met a fool in the forest, a motley fool, a miserable world. As I do live by food, I met a fool who laid him down and basked him in the sun and railed on Lady Fortune in good terms, in good set terms, and yet a motley fool. Good morrow, fool, quoth I. No, sir, quoth he. Call me not fool till heaven hath sent me fortune. And then he drew a dial from his poke, and looking on it with lacklustre eye, says very wisely, It is 10 o'clock. Thus we may see, quoth he, how the world wags. 'Tis but an hour ago since it was 9, and after 1 hour more 'twill be 11. And so from hour to hour we ripe, and then from hour to hour we rot, and thereby hangs a tale. When I did hear the motley fool this moral on the time, my lungs began to crow like Chanticleer, that fools should be so deep contemplative, and I did laugh sans intermission an hour by his hour. Oh, noble fool, oh, worthy fool, motley's the only wear. I love it. It's such a privilege to be able to say those words. Sometimes when I go back and, read modern works, I get kind of, sad that we don't dare to use more colourful language these days. I find much more joy in all of these juicy words. I mean, all of this speech to say, I met a fool in the forest and he made me laugh. It's just so pleasurable. And the words, I think, bring a lot of images as well. It's their sound. It's the images they bring. It's the way they knock against each other. Sometimes I wonder if Shakespeare practitioners actually don't get more than audiences out of this. We get to sit with the play for weeks and weeks and weeks. And we get to delve into the words and delve into the worlds of the characters and to have fun and to explore and to, emerge out of that completely bathed in this mystical poetry. It's sublime. We're very lucky. And the audience gets 3 hours, and they're, often very enjoyable 3 hours. But still, you only get 3 hours.
My name's Johnny McGarrity, and I was fortunate enough to be one of the bards in the yards back in the summer of 2020. I love Shakespeare, always have. But one of the highlights for me, an anecdote that sticks out in my mind, is I think it was August 2020. I drove down from London to Southampton to a care home to perform for the residents there. And it was a sweltering hot day. Oh, good Lord, it was baking hot. And when I arrived, my car does not have very good aircon at all. I was an absolute sweaty mess, but thankfully the nursing staff was still very welcoming. And I performed Bard in the Yard there in their car park to, 20 or 30 residents, I guess. And it was just such a privilege to do it to an audience full stop, but especially to an audience who'd had their visitation rights curtailed so drastically over the preceding 5 months or so. And I think just seeing someone come in from the outside world made a bit of a difference. But there was one woman, obviously a big Shakespeare fan, and she was really enjoying the performance. But the chap next to her was, he was a little less enthused. Possibly not a Shakespeare fan, possibly begrudging the fact that he was missing his TV programmes, I don't know, but he was sighing and, there's this, and when can we go back inside? And this lady just turned around, she said, "Oi, shut up, I'm enjoying it. If you don't want to watch it, go back inside, right?" At which point, he did indeed shut up and didn't say another word. Whereas she proceeded to act once more into the breach, dear friends, once more with me all the way through. And she probably knew it better than I did.
Thank you to Alix Dunmore, Constanza Roof, Hannah Young, Henry Sharnock, Honey Gabriel, Jonathan Blakely, Jonathan McGarrity, Keith McGuire, Will Harrison Wallace, Charlie McKellar, and all the other bards. King Leonardo is being performed by Rupert Sadler. The Scottish play is being performed by Luke Ferrugia. This podcast is produced by Will & Co. and La Souris Verte and supported by the Swiss Cultural Fund UK. My name is Zelda Chauvet. This is Shakespeare Goes Viral.